What does it take to live the good life? More importantly, what is the good life for you in retirement? That's really what we care about, isn't it? Well, we've been noodling on this all month here on the Retirement Answer Man Show. I am your host, Roger Whitney. Welcome to the show. If you have not listened before, this is a show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement. No. We want you to rock retirement. And this can be a hard subject to talk about, counting the cost of the good life for you in retirement. It can be pretty scary looking at that number. And we are going to talk about that a little bit today. Now, this month has sort of gotten discombobulated, and it's totally my fault. So we've talked about defining what your wants are, that base zest of life. We've talked about your wishes, that aspirational spice of life. And this episode was actually supposed to be the second episode of the month, where we define what that baseline good life looks like, those needs that you want to make sure you defend and you protect. Somehow this got all discombobulated, totally my fault. So we're just going to roll with it. Now, next week, I'm going to give you some forward looking here. Next week, I am going to share some tips from members of the Rock Retirement Club, because within the clubhouse, we have been talking and sharing how we have gone about counting the cost of the good life and how we track our spending in many different ways in order to make it not painful, but aspirational and powerful, so you can be more intentional about your actions. So we're going to share tips from the club members. So I'm excited about that because I love this clubhouse because there are a lot of really smart, really intentional, really loving people in there. And I think we're all going to benefit from everybody walking together. But we can't do any of this stuff until we get to that all-important disclaimer. Real simple here. Just don't take advice from me, right? That's the basis of it. I'm going to talk about maybe returns. Well, hey, past returns don't guarantee future results. I may talk about things that I've seen that have worked. That's not a recommendation for you. I'm just sharing, hopefully, some of my wisdom and knowledge, and so you can make decisions that are best for you. Really, the only people I give advice, and I try to be pretty strict about this, are people that I work for as a fiduciary in my financial planning practice, because I know a lot about them. I'm walking life with them. And that gives me some currency to be able to speak into your life. For you, though, I don't know you, and you don't know me that much. So don't take advice from me. And before you make any decisions, go to your financial advisor, your legal advisor, your tax advisor, and talk to them because they know you, all right? That's just common sense. Now, let's get on to the hot topic and talk about this baseline of life in order to live the good life. So when we're counting the cost for retirement and we've moved beyond simply the worry of how will it all work. Some of us never move beyond that, by the way. That's just what they're focused on and create a lot of stress for themselves, which we're going to talk about next week a little bit. But once we've moved on from that mindset, we start to think, what could the quote unquote good life in retirement look like? It can get a little messy because what is considered a need or an essential item as that baseline category and what is actually a want or a wish? Now, we can make lists and we're going to have some things that we think are essential things in retirement that we want to put into this needs category, but it's very different from person to person. If you've listened to the show long enough and maybe listen to some of our case studies in Retirement Plan Live, which we need to do another one of those. And I've been so crazy busy, we haven't done the planning for that, but stay tuned, we will. We had very different people. We had one lady who I got a lot of pushback, and there's no way somebody could live and actually be happy on the little amount of money that they were spending in retirement. I forget what the number was, but it was, $30,000, $40,000 a year, if that. And I have talked with her a number of times, and seems to be an extremely happy lady. They are very fulfilled with that baseline need cost for them. But it can seem silly to you maybe. And I've seen the other extreme, and I've had to deal with the other extreme of someone spending $300,000-$400,000 a year on quote unquote essential items. Not wants, not wishes. No, this is how we got to live. These are deal breakers. We got to have this. And to you, that might seem insane as well. But it's all relative. And ultimately, all of us have to make these decisions for ourselves and then count the cost. And as long as it's viable, then make intentional decisions to act it out. But this essential needs category, it's a difficult category for a lot of people because what is a need and what is a want? Now, it's going to be relative to the financial resources that you have to harness to provide for it, right? If you have ample resources, awesome. But most of us live in what we'll call, so there's three categories I think of. I think of underfunded, where the funding really isn't there to support the lifestyle needs, quote unquote needs that someone wants. There's constrained, where it should work, but there's risks and there's things that could go wrong. And then there's overfunded, which is, where there's more than enough money to provide for those essential needs, regardless of what the number is. Most of us are in constrained. At least, most people I encounter are in the constrained category, where it could work easily, but, there might be some turns and twists along the way. Where I find problems, at least in my experience in talking to people and working with people, is it's so easy, especially here, right? If you're in America, especially here, of categorizing something that's a want or a wish as an essential need. Now, for some, the golf club is the essential need. Now, you might think, that's silly. Why would a golf club? That's a discretionary expense. That should be a want category. That may be true for you, but for some people, it's an essential need. And having worked with enough clients, I understand a lot of the logic behind it. It's their one passion. It's all of their social life. It's their community. It is part of the ecosystem, the base ecosystem that supports a lot of what they want out of life. So I understand that could be a need for them, whereas you might think it's a silly expense. So you can see how, it's very easy to get really utilitarian, if that's the word I'm looking for, and say, no, it's always just the things like we're going to talk about a little later. These are just the basics. And then you should be happy with that. That blue collar, just suck it up and find joy other ways. But for others, no. It could be the need to travel. It could be the need to give to charity. For some people, those are very valid needs. So this is something you're going to need to define for yourself. Because I think of this need category as deal killers, meaning things that you'll walk away from the table because you have to have. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But that said, it can be a cage that you build. If you take a lot of wants and call them needs, that can lead to a very sad life. And it can also lead, because I've seen it, it can also lead to financial disaster. Because some people are so unwilling to make the choices, the hard choices of eliminating what are really wants, because they call them needs, that they will literally go through all their money or head on that path where ultimately it's not going to be a happy ending. It may not be logical to you or I, but some people, it just is what it is. And you can't change someone that doesn't want to change. So this is a really weird, you would think the need or the essential category would be really simple, but it can be a lot more complex than you might realize. Now, why are we even going through this need, want, wish category and counting the cost in this way? And I think I mentioned this on a previous episode of a lot of times we just sort of group it all together. Well, a lot of things, almost everything in life, especially when we're dealing with more finite resources, with income slowing down in retirement, it ends up being a negotiation, a year-by-year negotiation with yourself. If we have our needs and all we have are needs, That's like having one lever in a machine to change trajectory of things. We have one lever to control everything. But if we have our needs and then we have our wants and those are listed out and broken out, and then we have our wishes, those are broken out and listed out, rather than just having one control to evaluate what to do, now it almost starts to look like an airplane cockpit where there are knobs everywhere, because when you have to renegotiate with yourself, do I work more? Do I give up the club membership? Do I travel? Do I slow travel? Can I speed travel up? Can I give more? Should I slow down giving? All these things, we want to know what they are individually. We want to have them be an individual lever. So when we're going through that negotiation of what is possible for us on the onset, we can set the dashboard up correctly. And then when life throws us an easy one, much better than expected markets, or a windfall of some sort, or that consulting gig that you didn't expect, we can dial up your life and bring some things back in order to take advantage of this good fortune. And on the opposite end, when life throws you a curveball, you can dial down certain things, dial up certain things to make sure, or to help you assure that you are on a path that is healthy and a path that's good stewardship. So we really want to break all these things down. So basically what I'm saying is life is a series of trade-offs, right? Duh, we know that. But it's a series of trade-offs in this negotiation, because once you get all this stuff counted and set today, it will change next year and the year after that and the year after that, because you're going to change and the things that you value and your situation is going to change. So you want to constantly be going through what these trade-offs are, because you got to be careful what you value, because that could sabotage you in the event that you have to make some adjustments. So with that, let's go on to practical planning and go through some of the very basic needs that we pretty much all are going to have to deal with to make sure that you count these so you know what that baseline is. So in the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great, they talk about this idea of marching above the death line, which is never taking risks that will jeopardize a business. So if you're going to take a business risk, just make sure that risk is above the death line. Well, the same thing can apply to counting the cost for retirement when we talk about establishing those basic needs. Those basic needs serve as that death line as your base lifestyle that you want to make sure that you can solidify and protect, because you don't want to have the world or life happen to you and all of a sudden financially go below that death line and be on a bad track in terms of the financial viability of your retirement. So we need to establish what those basic needs are. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And we're just going to talk in general terms about the type of items that you're going to want to cover. Now, I have given some tips in earlier episodes, but a couple thoughts here before I go through just a list of basic needs that you need to cover. The first is, it's always good to start with a top-down budget, which is looking at what your spending is right now, and start by using that as a baseline. So a really simple way to do that, if you don't want to have to build spreadsheets, although I do think you should dial this in, is to take your total compensation or income, subtract your savings, and that's going to equal your consumption. So that's a really quick down and dirty way to get an idea of what's my number for my baseline needs. The opposite way is doing a bottom-up budget. And I think you need to do that too when you're starting to dial the cost for retirement, and starting with the basic needs is the best place to start. So let's just go through a list of basic needs real quickly so you can start to think about and plan for counting the cost of that base lifestyle. So the first one I'm going to start with is the one that tends to be a big topic, and we're definitely going to dive into this in the future. In fact, we have a little special project working on this right now with some RRC members, and that is healthcare, especially prior to Medicare. Now, a few years ago, Fidelity came out with a retirement estimate, and they said the average couple is going to need $280,000 in today's dollars to cover medical expenses in retirement, and that's excluding any long-term care. Holy cow! $280,000 is a huge number. That can be very scary. But let's think about that for a second, because a lot of that's like kids. You remember, if you've ever seen any of those studies where they talk about, the cost of raising a child, when you look at the total number that they come up with, it can be a huge number. But remember that $280,000 likely is going to be spread out over 25 or maybe even more years. So don't let the sticker shock of what that number is intimidate you, because it's going to happen in drips and drabs, much like everything in life. Now, we did a series on healthcare before Medicare. I think it was episode 211 to 214. So I definitely would suggest that you go check that out when you're starting to try to dial these costs in. And we're going to redo that series after we get done with our special project in the RRC. But this is an important topic, especially in retirement, because this is going to end up being potentially one of the major expenses you have when it comes to those basic needs. You're going to have drugs, you're going to have hospitals, you're going to have, even before Medicare, you're going to have your premiums, you're going to have things happen to you. And a lot of this is just going to get eaten up. So we want to make sure we dial this in as best we can. So we have two levels here. So when you're dialing in this basic need, you got to think of estimating the cost of healthcare before Medicare, and then whether that's private insurance, an employee benefit using a health share program, or something with the ACA, Affordable Care Act with subsidy planning. And then we have to talk about healthcare after Medicare, after you qualify for Medicare. And there are some sites that you can easily get, if you Google it, base estimates for what it's going to cost you when you're on Medicare. Usually for a couple, when I look at adding all the parts of B and D and the Medigap insurance and some out of pocket, I assume about $10,500 a year. So, that's a good place to start. And then also when we talk about healthcare in this needs category, I think it's important that you consider adding in wellness spending, whether that's yoga, whether that's nutrition, anything that can help you make sure that your physical and your mental and your spiritual state are always tuned up and growing, because that leads to a great life in a lot of ways. So medical or healthcare before and after Medicare is definitely one thing we want to have counted in that basic need category. Now, the second is going to be your housing, right? With healthcare, we're going to need some place to live. So the items you're going to want to calculate in there are your mortgage or your rent. You're going to want to calculate taxes, insurance, general upkeep if you own a house. Retirement Manifesto, Fritz and I just had a discussion about taxes when it comes to housing and where you choose to live, because it can make a big difference. If you live in Tennessee, your real estate taxes are going to be fairly inexpensive. If you live in Texas like I do, they can be as much as a mortgage payment. So where you choose to live, you need to factor that in from this housing standpoint. The next thing is, if you have debt payments, you definitely want to have those factored in. Hopefully, you can get to a point where you're debt free, so you have maximum cash flow. We want to factor that in. And then we're going to want to factor in taxes. And this goes to the discussion that Fritz and I were having, and we may do some more exploration of this in a series on choosing where you want to live in retirement, because you're going to have income taxes, you're going to have real estate taxes, and you're going to have sales taxes. And more, you're starting to see some states be a lot more accommodative to baby boomers and retirees. He and I were talking about Georgia, and that, over the last decade or so, they've been changing how things are taxed in order to attract baby boomers, because they want the baby boomer money. They want you to live there and spend your money in their state. So they're actually working on, based on what Social Security is taxable, what portion of pension is taxable, what their sales tax is. Some states are very progressive in trying to attract baby boomers, Georgia being one of them. Other states have not been. I'll use Minnesota as an example. It's not a very inexpensive state from a tax burden standpoint to live in. Now, that can be really important because, one, you may have a pension. Two, you may be a consumer, so the sales tax can be high. And three, you may have Social Security, or most importantly, number four, you may have a lot of money in tax-deferred accounts. And how that is taxed on the state level can be a big difference from one state to another. A big enough difference that it could change the dynamics of your plan of when you could retire and what you can afford. Again, you can see how all these are rabbit holes that at some point we'll have to go down in depth. But for today, I just want to make sure that you think about this when you're counting the basic needs so you can determine where that baseline lifestyle. Now, on top of that, we're going to have utilities. We're going to have food. We're going to have transportation. When we think about transportation, we got a couple different things. We have, obviously, the purchasing the car or the car payment. I think the average car payment, last I saw, it was just over $500 a month. So if you like new cars, that's probably what you're going to have. $1,000 car payments are not unheard of anymore. You're going to have insurance on the car. You're going to have gas on the car. You're going to have repair, and you're going to have replacements of the car during retirement, which is something that a lot of people don't plan. They assume they'll buy a new car in retirement, and they don't realize, hey, I'm probably going to spend more money on a car in 3, 4, 10 years, depending on how you go. So when you're calculating your needs, you're going to want to think of things like cars and make sure if they're going to be reoccurring even every 5 or 6 years, that you have those counted in there, because that could, potentially be a lot of money. And then I do think in your base lifestyle, you want to have that base level of fun and entertainment. Because when I think of a needs category, I'm not talking about the bare minimum to house you and feed you. In my mind, I want that base needs category to be a good life. Not the spicy, fancy life with all the extras. That's the wants and the wishes. But if you had to pivot because of circumstance, you still want to have a full life and not feel like you're scraping by. So I do think there needs to be some base level of fun, whether that's eating out, clothing, travel, hobbies. And everybody has a different way that they think about this. And this goes back to some people's needs are other people's wishes. The average household, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they spend, the average household spends about $3,000 a year on dining out. I know people that spend a lot more, and I know people that spend a lot less. Some people would categorize that as a want, and others would categorize it as a wish. The same can go with clothing and that base travel that you just know you're going to have to do or want to do that is separate from the want and the wish category of travel. So to help you think about what might those cost, let's look at an article from USA Today. This was in May of 2018, talking about, what does the average person in retirement spend in each category? So I'm just going to go through these to give you an idea. For housing, on average, they're spending about $1,322 a month on housing. Transportation, just over $550. Healthcare, just about $500 a month. Food, just under $500 a month. Entertainment, about $200 a month. Now, this is on average. I guess my point is, for you, in this needs category, using the categories that we've listed, either go to your current spending budget and try to isolate these so you can figure out what that base spending need is going to be for you, or start bottom up and start to get an estimate for each category based on where you're going to live. Now, when you're doing this, don't worry. You're not going to get it right. But this is a process that you're ultimately going to keep doing over and over again. Because if you're not retired yet, you're sitting here trying to imagine the future and what that might be. But you've never been in retirement before. How are you supposed to know? So what you want to do is count the cost, maybe using your current lifestyle as the baseline, and know that you're going to iterate, because as you get closer and as you actually get into it, it's actually going to get more refined. The key here is not so much getting it right, but getting it in the ballpark so you can iterate as your life unfolds. So this is just a real basic of counting the costs for needs so you can start to see whether you're underfunded, overfunded, or in a constrained situation so you can start making decisions that's right for you. All right, with that, let's go get happy. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Roger.
Are you a good dancer?
I have a lot of fun while I'm dancing. I don't know if it would be other people's definition of good, but it makes me happy.
Well, I think that's good enough. So you have evolved already farther than I am. Because I like to dance. In fact, I like to sit in a chair. Usually while I'm driving, I think I'm actually really good as long as I'm sitting down, dancing, just moving my shoulders and everything. In fact, it makes my wife crack up. But as soon as I stand up, it all falls apart. It's not pretty. And unlike you, I have never gotten over my high school self of being so self-conscious of being on the dance floor.
You're worried about looking cool. See, I know I'll never be cool, so I just am not worried about it.
But dancing is fun. And what made me think of this was I sample music because I always change the music for the beginning of the show, and I have the service, and I really like old school funk. And the song that we played for today's, I probably played that 6 times while I was thinking of what to do for the opening. And I was jamming away while I was sitting down. And I'm so happy that there was not any video anywhere.
I'm kind of sad that there wasn't any video. I feel deprived because I have never seen you just rock out at your desk.
Shauna has tried to video me while I was dancing in the car because it makes her crack up, but I usually stop because I don't want to see it because I think I'm good in my head and that's good enough.
Okay.
But I think dancing, whether you're sitting down, laying down, or standing up, getting your body moving to some grooves, I think it can make anybody happy.
Makes you happy. That's right.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a 7-day sprint to take a little baby step to count the cost of retirement so we can start figuring out how to create the good life. So, Nicole, I already explained the boo-boo of what we talked about today was actually supposed to be 2 or 3 episodes ago. But our smart sprints were correct, but I sort of messed up the audio of when something goes in. So we're confused about the smart sprint. So what should we do?
In the next 7 days, you should dance if you want to.
But leave your friends.
Yes, I'm quoting safety dance.
But leave your friends behind. Is that the next?
Yes, it is. Very good.
Leave your friends behind.
You just look blankly at me when I try to quote thee.
Because your friends don't dance. And if they don't dance, what?
No friends of mine.
Okay. You get the week off of Happy Sprint. Just go dance. So our planned ask of you, it was a really small one, was to leave a review of the show on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to it. And we never asked that. And
Should we ask that today? I'm not real sure after our boo-boo.
I'm glad that you did not say my boo-boo, which you pointed out to me, by the way. Thank you. Yeah, of course we should.
We're in this together.
We are. But so we never ask, and it's like one of those podcast best practices. So if you're willing, it would help the show, help others find the show, which creates a bigger group so we can all walk a little bit together to, rock retirement. I hope you have a great day.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.